I want to start tonight actually by talking about disagreement. Whatever issue it is we're discussing, there are going to be disagreements. It may be surprising to hear, but we hear on many issues every day that we're only listening to the loudest voices in the room. And believe it or not, we hear that from people on both sides of every issue. We've spent a lot of time and energy this year working on policies and putting them in place to be able to address concerns as they arise, as they will arise, and be able to address them in a structured, fair, and equitable manner. For example, Policy 4005 addresses concerns around curricular materials. There have been a number of materials flagged since the policy was adopted, and every one has been able to be satisfactorily resolved with our faculty where that work should be done. We have to have a process and are not going to have knee-jerk responses to concerns around instructional materials. We have a thoughtful, structured process for reviewing materials, one that has resulted in all parties being satisfied with the outcome each time. That is what we will continue to do. Likewise, we are using our May board work session to talk about our process for vetting outside speakers to students. Our policies need refinement in light of a changing world. These issues are hard, but we're committed to doing the work and doing it well. I would also ask that when something comes up, as it inevitably will, please put away your jump to conclusions mats and let us try to resolve the issue. Tell us, and let us address it before trying to rile up the entire community, whether on Facebook or wherever. That does not help solve problems. It really doesn't. Maybe, please, give us the benefit of the doubt and a few minutes to address a concern before turning it into the next public feud. Despite what Facebook says, the five of us up here, not to mention the administration, are not incompetent. And we are working every day to provide all of our kids the best education we can in the most equitable environment we can. I want to take a minute to tell a story. And honestly, I try to leave my family completely out of the work I do up here, but I don't know. Maybe it will help if people understand that I've experienced some of this as a parent too. Last year, well before October 7th and the scary world we find ourselves in as Jews right now, my daughter heard anti-Semitic speech at school. It was the end of the day as she was leaving to board the bus, to Hebrew school actually, and she was quite upset and scared. She told the adults at Hebrew school who called the school and called me. I spoke to the principal who handled the incident immediately and completely appropriately. My child felt safe and heard and that the school took the issue seriously, as did I. And this is the first time that most of the people in this room, including people on this stage, are hearing about it because it was a building level issue and I let the building level administrators do their jobs, and they did them well. There will be issues and we will continue to address them and do everything in our power to make sure that all of our kids feel safe and valued as members of our community. Speaking of community disagreements, I want to say something about the SROs and their inclusion in the budget for adoption this evening. Everyone up here is guided as a first principle by what is best for kids, including most centrally their safety. Just talking about the board for a minute, we're five intelligent, thoughtful people who are up here because we care deeply about our schools and about our children. We know that there are arguments both in support of and against having SROs in school. We've read the studies and the data on every side and angle of the issue. We've also read the hundreds upon hundreds of emails we've gotten from the community on this. More than any other issue we've grappled with in my time on the board, and there have been a few hot button issues. We don't all agree with each other. Conversations the community doesn't see because school safety is rightfully an issue for executive session. But never once has any one of us accused any other of wanting children to come to harm, because we know that everyone up here believes that our first priority is keeping our kids and our faculty and staff safe in our buildings. We may have different beliefs on how to do that and what's the proper use of funds to do that and all of those things, but nobody up here wants harm to come to kids. The thought of it literally keeps us up at night. The community clearly does not agree. The number of emails we've gotten, both from people who want SROs and those who don't, over the course of this debate, insinuating that at best we're indifferent to harm coming to kids, and that at worst, if we don't agree with them, we're asking for children to be killed, is appalling. Please stop. We've gotten some really thoughtful emails about research and fiscal responsibility and both cutting SROs and cutting other things to pay for SROs. We understand that there's a lot of disagreement on this issue, and honestly, it's not a straightforward question, especially when you factor in the cost. We've done a lot of grappling with the question of SROs, each of us independently and as a group, and I think we come to stronger decisions and better ideas through respectful disagreement and discussion. It would be great if we could try to do that as a community, because I truly believe that there is not a single person, either up here nor in our community, who wants harm to come to any child. As with everything we do, each time we address an issue, we try to do better. Dr. Ackerman is going to address this in more detail, but if we do enter into new contracts with the town for the hiring of additional SROs, and/or when we renew contracts for the existing SROs, we will work to make those contracts tighter and more robust in terms of our role in the hiring and vetting process and our rights to inform the community of any changes to staffing or coverage. At Bottom, we went through a very extensive process of surveying the entire community on issues around school safety, and the overwhelming result was that our parents and our faculty want designated SROs in each building. We've crafted this budget seeking to be responsive to that feedback. Regardless of what happens with this budget and with this vote, we have to be able to move on and live and work and play and learn together. So I'm going to save my comment on the budget itself for after Dr. Ackerman's presentations, as we all will. And so I will conclude by wishing our families who celebrate a very happy Passover next week.
Thank you, Hillary. David, can you please pull up the community update? And I'm going to start tonight by sharing a preview of our student belonging results, and we will be holding a webinar last week, but this was the center point of our superintendent conference day, which Adam's going to talk about in a moment, and it is one of our main strategic initiatives moving forward in the district. So for the past 3 years, we've been asking our students about 3 major topics in terms of like our work with them, so that we can plan forward on how to best meet the needs of our students in grades 6 through 12, but really throughout the district, because the program is scaffolded. And so I'm going to talk about what each of these subcategories are in a minute. But I want you to know that the survey is designed by a company that does norming across the nation against other school districts that take the survey, to be able to make sure that it's valid, but also that the data that is returned to us is not influenced by the district itself, okay? And so just so you know, some demographic, and when Dr. Adam Schoenbart has his webinar, which he did last year, he'll go more into the impact of the demographics on responses. I just want you to understand that last year, we had 85% of the kids take it, and this year we had 83% of the kids take it, so that's a really good response rate for us. And so if you look at our scores for all of our students that took it in grades 6 through 12, you can see on diversity and inclusion, cultural awareness and action, and sense of belonging, we're right in the middle. And you can see a small change in the first 2 subcategories and a little bit of a greater increase in sense of belonging. And I'm going to show you where that really resonated in the survey results. And just so we're all on the same, have the same understanding of what the questions that we asked the kids, the first section really focused on students and how much time they spent with students from different races, ethnicities, or cultures, what their classes look like. Do they hang out with them outside of school or in school? Do they have any close friends from different racial, ethnic, or cultural backgrounds? How students are treated from different races, ethnicities, or cultures, and then how the adults treat students who are different from them. So that's the first category of questions. The second is about learning. So teachers and instruction in the classrooms, are they encouraged to learn about other students, to think about what someone else who's not like them is experiencing based on their identity? If they could have honest conversations with each other about race, think more deeply about race-related topics, how comfortable they are sharing their thoughts with other kids, how students have important conversations even if they are uncomfortable, and the frequency at which that is happening. Do we talk about news events related to race in our classes with adults, and how do we help students speak out against racism? So that's the second subcategory. And then the third is really about being connected. Do you feel like you're understood as a person in school? how connected you are to the adults, to each others, how much do you matter, and how much do you feel like you belong in the district. And so, in terms of Greeley, you can see that the greatest percent of increase in the subcategories was in sense of belonging, and it went up 7%, which is a good result. I mean, we still have to go, more to go, but like that was stagnant for 2 years. So some of the moves that the Greeley faculty has made, you can see an impact on that. So then the question might be, well, who responded in that way? And that'll be the information that Dr. Schoenbart will share in his presentation, and that's the information that Greeley will use to start digging into, what students are feeling a greater sense of belonging, what students are still feeling like they're disconnected. And so those are the conversations the faculty will be having with each other, and then we'll be sharing that information out with our parents. And then you can see a marginal increase in cultural awareness and action and diversity and inclusion. But I think one of the things we really need to think about in comparison with the national average are conversations in classrooms about diversity and inclusion are not aligned with that. So that's work that we know we need to do. Now in the middle schools, you can see a little growth or a regression in some of the subcategories. And so we need to think about that. So here is Bell, and then here is Seven Bridges. And so we're talking with our faculty in both of those buildings about some things that they're thinking about we need to do in terms of planning forward for next year based on these results. But I do want to also mention that in some of these categories where you see a little bit of a dip, we're either above the national average or we're at the national average. I'm not making like an excuse for the data. I just want to point that out because I think that's important. And then of course in the categories where we have a dip and we're below, that's an area of heightened focus that we need to pay attention to. And so next Tuesday at 6 o'clock, Adam will do his webinar, but we'll tape it and we'll push it out to families. But if anyone wants to participate in the webinar and ask questions, they can certainly do that. And then we also had the opportunity to survey our staff. So our district equity team went over those results, and then our school-based equity teams are going to be sharing those results with their faculties in their building because they're building based, and then we'll post those online too. We usually don't do a webinar for faculty, but we do post the results online for our parents to review as well. So I also want to share some highlights from Unity Day. So we had a great week last week. We had things happening throughout the building. We had high school students going down to the elementary schools. We had 2 presentations. We had a presentation at Greeley, a presentation at the high school, and then we had our shared readings, which were all very well received by our students. I did have to communicate out that I did make a schedule adjustment during Unity Day, and so I'm going to regroup with the BSU. I have a meeting scheduled with them next week to talk about like how they want to plan forward based on the schedule adjustment I made at the last minute. But we did have an excellent opportunity to support our students and support our belonging work that week. And so I want to thank the DET and I want to thank our faculty and our students for helping facilitate this event for the district. And then I want Adam just to talk a little bit about Superintendent's Conference Day and some of the work that we did because it's connected to the survey.
Thanks. So April 10th, as you know, was our final superintendent conference day of the school year. Day began with all of our educators coming here to Greeley. And the first thing we had was a session facilitated by our district equity team and our building leaders, where they actually dove into all the student sense of belonging data that will be presented to the community, as Dr. Ackerman mentioned. That first session also queued up our keynote for the morning, which was Dr. Daisy Khan. All of our faculty and staff went to the gymnasium for Dr. Khan. Dr. Khan's an award-winning speaker, an author, an activist, a commentator, and the founder of the Women's Islamic Initiative in Spirituality and Equality. The acronym is WISE. It's the largest global network of Muslim women committed to peace building, gender equality, and human dignity. So Dr. Khan presented to us on Islam, Islamophobia, her work as a leader committed to peace building, equality, and justice. Following Dr. Khan's keynote, the faculty went back and met as building teams to revisit their building student sense of belonging survey data, do some planning, make some connections to the keynote, unpack the keynote. And after that, we moved on to a luncheon that was sponsored by our colleagues in the CCT, which included a benefits fair during the lunch block. After the lunch block, faculty had a chance to take their faculty sense of belonging survey. They also gave us feedback on district literacies, which we'll update the board on soon. That's part of our strategic plan to convert that profile of Greeley graduate into literacies. So we have some feedback from the faculty from Superintendent Conference Day on that. And then the day ended with some project time for departments and grade level teams. And we do survey the faculty after every Superintendent Conference Day so we can get feedback on what went well and what we might be able to improve. And I'm pleased to report 83% of our faculty, when asked about their overall experience as a professional learner, reported that it was either good or excellent. The other choices were fair or poor. So, we got some feedback to make it even stronger. But overall, it was a good day and our last conference day for this school year.
Thank you, Adam. And so I want to share with you, since the third quarter is over, our incidents of hate speech, bias, and discrimination, so you can see how the matters that were addressed by the building administration over the course of the third quarter. Now, we have gotten feedback along the way here this year that people would like this to be a little bit more specific, but as we discussed, this is in our approach needs to be defined at the start of the school year, so we'll be talking about this with the policy committee over the summer, but I did want to share this information with you. And I've been working through conversations with families about some things that they're seeing on social media or in the newspaper, and they have questions about, but I do want to remind everyone that, we have privacy rights that we need to follow for students. And so the district is real limited in what we can talk about when issues happen. So, people may have questions about some of the slides that, or the slide that I shared around the incidents, or might have some questions about some of what they're reading in the newspaper. And the district cannot comment. And so I just wanted to clarify that, because I think people are well-intentioned and they want clarity, which is completely understandable, but there are so many regulations that we need to follow to protect student privacy that really limit our ability to talk about specific issues if they don't involve your child. And so, as Hillary mentioned, I had also received some feedback around the SRO program based on an article that was in the newspaper. And so parents wanted to share with me some concerns about information they felt like they needed to receive from the district. And so in working through those conversations with families about our role versus the Newcastle Police Department, I did receive some suggestions in terms of moving forward as we prepare for potential contract negotiations with the town. So I did want to share them. I already shared them with Jim Carroll, that these are things that we're thinking about, that we need to discuss. And so I kind of lumped them into two categories. So the first is suggestions around additional layer of vetting that would actually be completed by the school district, conducted by an outside agency before the board would appoint an SRO to work in our schools. Clearly articulating the notification process and procedures if an SRO is involved in certain matter or incident that occurs outside of the school district that necessitates a leave of absence, like, for example, an arrest, because they're not our employees, or they're contract employees. So like real language around that, the community is suggesting would be helpful. And then some kind of joint evaluation system that we would engage in with the town around SRO performance. And I also received an additional suggestion to talk about in terms of whether or not we should think about having an independent evaluation of the current SRO program. So I did want to share that with everyone, because those are, I think that's important feedback for the board to hear based on the conversations that I've been having. And then I just wanted to highlight, we have a lot of upcoming events between now and our next meeting. And so we have our concert. We have a huge music festival happening here on April 26th and 27th. We have celebrations after school around student identity. We have our petitions due for the Board of Education on Monday. We have STEM Fest here this weekend. So I encourage people to participate in the many activities happening throughout the district. And we're really excited on May 2nd to welcome our incoming kindergarten families to orientation.